I am Talbot G. I'm the CEO of HARDI, and I am the least technically knowledgeable person on this webinar. So, congratulations to all of you. The best analogy might be the cooking shows where the host tries to be funny and entertaining, likes to eat, but doesn't know how to cook a thing, and then hands it over to the actual chefs who then really give you the real details of what makes something good, right, wrong, better, and different. So, with that being said, Mike Breen is our chef. I am so excited and happy to be doing this in collaboration with Nate. Mike sits on Nate's technical committee and is also a proud member of ours as a member of Auer Steel. So, Mike, a quick intro.
Hi, thanks Talbot, and thanks everybody for joining. I'm excited to be here. And my background is I've been in the industry for over 30 years. I started out as a technician, going to a trade school, and the last 7.5 years I've been at Auer Steel, leading the tech support training and warranty teams. I give a lot of classes. I love training. I love giving the classes online as well as in person. And yeah, I love this topic. I'm really excited to talk about it here today. I hope that I have some insight that can help out with answer and really help the industry out today.
Excellent. Excellent. See, it's what he's already just a better human. Like I'm like all flustered that we have to cover all this information because I know the distributors have tried real hard with a lot of their trainings. But at the same time, I'm super excited about hopefully us helping to make a positive difference here. So let's get into the whys. Why are we even doing this program? First off, we're going to keep a residential focus for this program. We'll get down the road. We can do some stuff on commercial. Right now, the biggest noise and the biggest frustrations we hear are coming from the residential contractors. Let's focus on the residential market. So we're going to stay there. But the other big why is we aren't going to shy away from the fact we have a refrigerant supply issue, whether it's the gross amount of pounds of refrigerant or it just simply not being in the right place at the right time for when the installations need to happen. The bottom line is we have a problem, and this transition has not gone as well as we had modeled it out and hoped it to be. So rather than just being upset and mad and angry about that, let's focus on solutions. Let's figure out how we get through this. How do we fix this? Make the shortage as short as possible. And by the way, let's help prevent future shortages as this market just continues to grow going forward. When we talk about the shortage, I do want to cover just a few quick things. Everything you've probably heard about what caused this shortage probably has a modicum of truth to it. But I can tell you that there is no one single glaring issue that caused this. It was a terrible timing of a whole bunch of confluences that came together that contributed at the worst possible timing on top of unprecedented, unforecasted demand all at the same time. So, yes, there were cylinder issues. Yes, there is production, refilling, packaging issues. Yes, there are issues with the way the forecasts themselves were initially built, and we all ended up being under what we expected. Yes, the transition has moved way faster than a lot of people expected, especially in the warmer climates, the southern parts of the country. So that pulled demand and it moved product or required product that was in one place that really kind of maybe in retrospect should have been in another. Yes, that's absolutely a problem. And then the one today, most importantly, is there are things happening out in the field which are also not helping this situation. Now, some of it, and the contractors out there, we hear you, we feel for you. You're just trying to do the best you can for your customer and make them happy. I get it. We totally get that. But it is important to us that you understand the big picture here and why getting through some things that may not be in the short term the most expedient, but in the medium and the long term will way be in your interest going forward. And then ultimately, what we want to do here, make sure we're following the law. So we're definitely going to cover that today. And then make sure that we're creating a competitive advantage for all of you on this program, other programs like this who are trying to do the right thing. The market needs to reward you, recognize you, and understand that you're trying to do it the right way because that's going to be essential for us getting through all of this transition for a decade to come going forward. So with that, enough of me. Let's get to the real expert here. Enough of my droning on here. So three big categories we're going to try to follow here is installation of A2L systems and what we're seeing today and what you need to know. We want to also cover the performance and safety of the A2L systems. And then finally, the service, reclaimed gas, refrigerant management, all of that. So I'm going to kick us right off right away here on the installation of systems. Easiest question you could have anticipated, Mike, right? Given the current shortage of 454B, we keep hearing about 454B systems being topped off with R410A to complete the charge if they don't have the 454B on them. Um, will this work?
Well, thank you for that. And yes, I do want to say that I can feel the pain of those dealers and the technicians and the contractors out there with this shortage right now. And hopefully answering these questions and um, can help us all become a little bit better rather than wishing it was easier. And I look at some of these challenges in the past when there were shortages of parts or different difficulties like that. And it's just forced us to really hone our skills and to become better at our craft. And hopefully some of that comes from this. So topping off or mixing with 410A, is the system going to work? No, the system is not going to work. It's homeowners, end users are purchasing a product with certain expectations. And that is going to move heat from the inside to the outside, and it's going to perform at a high level, right? And if you're mixing a different refrigerant into that, it's not going to work as sold if it works at all. The biggest point, though, is the legal aspect of this. It is illegal to do this, and it is not safe. You've got an A2L, mildly or slightly flammable refrigerant that's being topped off or mixed with an A1 refrigerant. And who knows what kind of mixture that you're making right there and what kind of properties it's going to have or what the effects are going to be. So the safety aspect of that that's what scares me, right? Um, the other thing with that 410A is that it's already valuable, but it's going to become more and more valuable as we go on season to season. And we do not condone, or we don't want to see that being wasted on these 454B systems as well, just to get a system running when there might be some other avenues that we'll address here a little bit later.
Yeah, yeah, great point. So, going a little bit deeper in this into safety, I, not to put you on the spot, I'll talk more generally. We're talking with a lot of the manufacturers, and there have been concerns raised about the systems were designed with very specific safety standards. And if you do start mixing refrigerants, you have then hypothetically violated that manufacturer's safety standards. And the bigger issue is, and the other issue is, you as the installing contractor may be assuming a disproportionate amount of the responsibility and liability then for that system going forward. So, this sounds like a pretty serious issue. What do you think on that?
Absolutely. It's not just the warranty of the equipment, but it's the risk that you're taking on. And it's not, that's A2L as a whole. It's not just the mixing of the refrigerants, but it's these best practices that you really are putting yourself on the line when you're cutting corners or taking shortcuts or doing things like this. I joke in some of my classes that it's no longer a UL certification, but it's a U certification. You take on that liability and that risk on yourself as a technician.
Interesting. Well, while we're on the topic about mixing of refrigerants, 454B systems being topped off maybe with 32, just because you could maybe get a hold of 32, maybe not the 454. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, they're both A2L refrigerants, but again, it's not going to work. It's different properties, it's different mixtures. The 454B is roughly 68-69% R32. If you're adding a little bit of R32 to that mix, you've now created your own refrigerant that you get to go to ASHRAE and get a classification for. But it's not going to work in this situation. And I've heard that is the case, out in the field, from those that have tried it. Unfortunately, I wish that nobody would go down that path, but yeah, it's not going to work.
So help the novice here for a second. When you say it's not going to work, like, does that mean like it literally is not going to blow out any cold air, or it might, and then it's going to die on you at some point? Like, give me a sense of what not going to work actually means.
Sure. That's a tough question. That's
Okay.
one where it could, it's the same as any kind of repair or maintenance or anything as a service technician. Is it is it going to last 10 minutes? Is it going to last, as soon as my tail lights go away, or is it going to last a year?
Got it. Got it.
It's going
So
to have poor performance though. Even
gonna
if
have poor
it
performance.
does work, there's going to be poor performance, what that customer did not pay for.
And you contractors out there, the first thing you should be hearing is callback. Oh my gosh, how expensive is a callback? Let's go back of the napkin on that one, right? And then think about whether you want to condone this kind of thing. We did get a quick question. I think is a really relevant one here. Will mixing refrigerants nullify the A2L sensors? And what do we know about warranty impacts in general?
Oh, that's a good question. The A2L sensor, if that's going to pick up that refrigerant, I guess it depends. I haven't been able to test it. I'm not going to be the one to test that, and say that yes or no, but I would assume that you're changing the lower flammability limits of that mixture, and it's not going to work. And so that's the safety factor of this, that a lot of liability on there where I don't even want to go down that
Okay.
path, and the warranty impacts of it, that's going to be up to the manufacturer, whether or not how they're checking these systems and things like that. But if they would find out, I don't know any manufacturer that's going to say, yeah, we'll let that compressor go through, even though we know that you put in the wrong refrigerant. I
Right,
can
right.
see them declining that.
So I guess the short answer to that question would be you want to let a manufacturer answer that one, because if you're a contractor out there who can give you a definitive answer, yes or no, it means you've done the wrong thing out there, right? So let's not find out through actual practice. So 32 systems, those also are growing very, very quickly out in the market. Can they be topped off with 410A?
No, that's going to be essentially the same thing as uh, the 454B with 410A. It's R32 does make up R410A. It's a 50/50 mix with R125. But again, you're changing the properties of that refrigerant. It's going to react differently. And again, the liability of it and the performance of it is going to be poor.
Okay, and at the risk of further exposing myself as a technical naivete here, different oils too, correct? Don't we have different
Sometimes,
characteristics between
yeah.
them?
So the viscosity, what I've seen in different webinars, that the viscosity of R32 and R454B is going to be different. There's also the POE oil to the PVE oil in different systems where you're going to have to, that could become a nightmare as well. So I don't want that to sound like I'm condoning anything here.
Right,
Check the oil
right.
first, but yeah, the different oils, that can be a factor. Mhm.
Okay, so we did get a question from the audience as well too. Can we evacuate the 454B out of the system and then use 410A?
That's a good question. It's a valid question, but the answer is still no on there, because that equipment was designed and it was certified for use with a certain refrigerant. And again, it's taking the risk on yourself if you're taking that out and putting something into it. It's now you own that liability, especially if it's a those systems with the slightly flammable. I wouldn't want to recommend that or take that risk on. And I try to steer, technicians and contractors away from any situation like that as much as I can.
Gotcha. And to prove just how smart our audience is, they've already anticipated my next question here. So here you go, Mike. What are the symptoms end users may experience with systems that have been topped off with the wrong refrigerant?
Uh, well, that is going to be poor performance. I guess I want to start this one off by saying, some of the things that have really guided me and guided our classes and a lot of um, to open this up is, looking at first of all, anything that I'm doing here today, is it going to be legal? Is it going to be safe? You always want to make sure that you're not breaking the law and you're not going to put yourself or anybody else in harm. But then, what am I doing here that's going to extend the life of that equipment, um, reduce the breakdowns and the callbacks? It's a big one as a former service manager. And increase the efficiency, increase the comfort level of that system. And that's if you're using that as your guiding message or your guiding truths, hopefully that can keep you away from this. But with that, is it performing? Is it as efficient as possible? Is it going to provide the comfort that the end user expects? Those, and whether or not that it's been mixed, all of those questions, I think you start with the performance of the equipment and take a look, commissioning. I'm a big fan of commissioning, been doing it for over 20 years when I was in the field, and getting that starting point of the system and also seeing what the actual BTUs are of that system, how much heat is actually being removed. And I think that's where I'm going to start with something like this when it's when I fear that it's potentially a mixed system. Um, it's a challenge with R454B and R32 if those two refrigerants are mixed, or even if somebody puts some R410A in, because to test this in the field, you'd test the pressure and compare it to the temperature surrounding the condenser outside to see, well, what, using a pressure temperature chart, comparing to see, well, where does it line up on this scale? R32, R454B, and R410A are all relatively close. So it is going to be a challenge for a technician, and that's why I would recommend going to performance first.
Got it. Okay. So it sounds the manufacturer specifications on a system probably gives you a lot of these performance diagnostics, all these things that you would be verifying to ensure that you've installed correctly. Are there specific ones that if you're called because a customer's complaining about performance of a new system and you get called into it, you didn't install it, like are there one, two, three things you would immediately check first or measure?
Um, yeah, I would. I'm a non-invasive technician. I some may say it's laziness not throwing the
Mic freeze
gauges
on
on.
us here. Freezing on this. There we
Let me
go.
know if I'm back here.
Yeah, I think you're back now. There you
All
go.
right, good. Um, I'm a non-invasive technician by trade. That's what I like to do. It wasn't um, maybe it was because I was lazy. I was looking for an easier way to get to the end result. And so I would not throw the gauges on there first. First, I would check the airflow, the CFM, always starting with airflow. And then I would jump over to the actual um, performance, seeing the enthalpy change across the coil to see, again, is this 2-ton system doing 2 tons of cooling? And then I would jump into the putting the gauges onto the system, gauge up and check the subcooling and superheat on there, if it's off. But yeah, that's how I would approach that.
So a couple other factors that is probably not helping the shortage issue is some of the things we've kind of seen in the field that have been different than maybe what when it was all a 410A market or all an R22 market. Um, uh, Line sets. So we've been hearing about existing line sets being used in the installation of new A2L systems, line sets being different, diameters being different, which is then impacting charge sizes. Comments on that, thoughts on that, best practices on that.
Sure. I think taking a look at that, the line set, and using that approach of looking at the system of how much charge is required before you even install it. I'm trying to sway a lot of contractors that way rather than install it, turn it on, and then weigh in the rest of the charge based off of subcooling. Check off of subcooling on systems that have TXVs, which is everything now. But really looking at the line set ahead of time, saying, well, this system is pre-charged for 15 feet. I've got 25 feet, so I'm going to need 6 ounces more of refrigerant on this, and looking at that ahead of time. Um, there are some manufacturers out there where you can downsize that line set and go from a 3/8 to 5/16 or a quarter, and take a look, follow the manufacturer's guidelines of the equipment that you're installing, and train up on that. Understand what you can do, because you can get by, or you can get that system up and running if you can do something like this. The line set by itself, if it was a R410A system ahead of time, you can reuse that line set, flush it with nitrogen first, purge it through. If there was any kind of contaminants, or there was any concern of um, acid or burnout or anything like that, use some sort of a flushing agent. But yeah, otherwise, best practices, industry best practices when it comes to reusing line sets that way.
Okay. Speaking of charges and charge sizes in general, that's been another thing that we've had in a lot of conversations. There's been some variances in pre-charge amounts. There's also been a lack of clarity into how to model out or anticipate how much additional refrigerant you might need for every additional foot of line set that you might be installing. What are you finding? What are you hearing? What are you seeing? What do you recommend as it relates to preparation for, again, pre-charge amounts and then, additional feet of line set?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'd like to start out with, we're learning a lot of these new practices that are becoming requirements by some manufacturers when it comes to pressure testing, evacuation, hold times, things like that. And that's imperative, and that's important first off, because it's going to eliminate and it's going to cut down on leaks. The last thing that you want is to put this in and have to add an extra 6 ounces of charge onto a system, and then have a leak where you're limited on your resources to begin with. So don't really look to shore up those best practices when it comes to installation. The charging of line set, take a look at the manufacturer that you're using, and see in the installation guide of how much refrigerant is needed for those systems. And this is going to be me as a technician. Not it could get me in trouble with some, I guess, but me as a technician, again, I'm looking at the performance on that system. If I'm going on a system where I have to add, well, I've got 3 to 5 ounces that I need yet there, rather than topping off with something else or mixing refrigerant into there, check the performance, check the subcooling and superheat, and see if it is possible for that to be within the range of that manufacturer's specifications, to be within the range that the manufacturers give you on the subcooling range and the superheat range. And you may find that that system is going to perform just fine.
Perfect. Well, I think we had a question just to that point. So just to make this point extremely clear, the question is it possible to install a R454B system undercharged and come back later to top it off when you can get the refrigerant?
That's a tough question,
Yeah.
to answer, because I don't want to say, oh, absolutely every single one of them you can do it. But I think there's going to be cases, and there's going to be manufacturers and equipment out there that you're going to find that are with coil matchups and things like that, where it will work and it can work. And we've got a training lab where I've tested things like that, and I've seen that, being a few ounces undercharged, you're still getting the BTU performance. You still have the superheat. You still have the column of subcooling there. Everything's protected, especially during summer. Low ambient conditions that can change, but we're in the heat of summer, and hopefully this is all over with as the summer goes on, so we don't have to worry about that then.
Okay. On that point though, just a question, like if it's a little undercharged, are we talking about it could cause a true failure or it's purely a performance issue?
Yeah, that's going to depend upon the charge. That's going to be
Okay.
depend upon how much it's undercharged, how much it holds to begin with. And that's with the caution there. I almost yeah, it's something that's going to be a case by case when you're doing the startup and the setup. If it's one where it's a new construction and you've got to get a system into it, you it's worth the risk maybe to check that. And
Okay.
again, this is the opinion of Mike Breen. Not affiliated with anything else on that opinion, just trying to throw some ideas out there to help. But if it's a retrofit and you're switching for a system that's working, that's one where maybe I would hold off on that one if I'm not sure, especially if it's got a longer line set and I don't have the full top off charge
Okay.
available.
All right. Thank you. Helpful. So this is one's a little bit of a flipping of the coin here. So, okay, Mike, you ready for this one? If an existing 410A system is charged with 454B and a leak sensor is installed, will it violate any law? I hear from some manufacturers that the system will quote unquote work.
Let me think about that. If it's an existing 410A system charged with 454B, leak sensor is installed.
I mean, the glib answer is use that 454B to go install a 454B system, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I'm a little confused on why that would be. But does it violate laws? I'm not sure. If there's a law, there's no mixing involved with it. I think it's local codes can be affected by this. And again, the manufacturers, the liability of it and will it work? I would probably think that that's not going to work.
Yeah,
So,
you're putting an A2L in a non A2L rated system,
mhm.
and the next person who comes to work on it, may not know that. So I don't know. It just doesn't seem like a great idea on that one. But um, well, okay. So we talked a little bit about some examples or experiences you might see when a system has had mixed refrigerants. You're seeing performance degradations, things like that. Let's say we've already diagnosed that. We know for a fact we are able to diagnose in the field that someone mixed the refrigerants in this system. Now what do I do? How do I get this thing back up to running to spec and get the customer happy again and trusting their contractor?
Well, that's now going to be a mixed refrigerant, and you're going to have to remove that refrigerant from that system completely. And that's going to, don't mix it again if it is already a mixer. So use a fresh tank for this, a fresh recovery tank that's A2L rated because whether it's mixed with R410A and 454B, it's going to be an A2L. So you're going to have to pump that into there. That refrigerant's going to have to get destroyed. I know that there's maybe some refrigerant manufacturers out there, reclaim facilities that may try to separate, but everybody I've heard is destroying that refrigerant. And that's a shame. That's not going to be used again, and that's going to be out of the circulation for everybody. After reclaiming that, one of the practices that came up from a lot of our training was called like a double evacuation or a service evacuation, where you're purging the system with nitrogen after you recover to get that residual refrigerant that's trapped in the oil. To get that out, you're going to put a vacuum pump on there to ensure that you get all of that refrigerant and all of that mixture out of there. Certain cases, depending upon what it is, you may have to change, remove that compressor and change the oil on there if it's bad enough. Um, Filter dryers is going to be another one that you're going to have to do, and you may have to really that's why not doing this, because you're really going to have to almost babysit the system and make sure that there's no ill effects down the road with that mixture that's going to occur.
Yeah. So I don't want to jump too far ahead into our action items, but this seems like a good point to just point out. Inevitably, good contractors out there are going to get called to some of these systems where they're having these issues. And I think it would be really important, I think, to try to leave as much documentation, explanation to that homeowner about why all this work on their brand new system needed to be done, right? And I mean, even just one or two instances in a given market will be a huge deterrent to those individuals out there who might be inclined to do things the wrong way. I mean, is that something that the contractor could or should be able to do when they've come back to service and fix and repair a poorly installed new system?
Yeah, it's how I would treat any callback, essentially. You're not going to cut any corners on that second trip back. And when it's something like this where there's safety involved, I would not if we're gonna get this working, this is what we have to do for me to put my name on this and to ensure it and to warrant this workmanship that I'm going to provide. It's all of these items. Um, yeah.
Good, good. So the flip side of that is also documenting when you do the install correctly, right? Like, and by the way, shout out to our friends at ACCA. They're actually working on an extension of their quality installation program with the intent of empowering contractors, technicians to provide an actual completion certificate that would document and use the tools that you have out in the field to give that customer the true verification of this is rated for this refrigerant. We use this refrigerant. This is what it was charged to meet the spec. Yeah, so that therefore they're bulletproof in what they did and doing it right and differentiate themselves from those other guys out there who may not do any of that, right? So, good practice.
Yeah, more documentation, the better. That's why a full commissioning report is really key here. That you can leave behind and don't leave anything up to guesswork. By another contractor or anything else. Really having everything documented. It really is a CYA essentially, especially for the installing technician to ensure that, hey, I did a great job here today. I'm proud of this. Take a look at how this system is performing. Take a look at how thorough I am in my commissioning report and ensuring that it's going to be a system that lasts long. It's going to not have breakdowns. It's not going to cost a lot of money to operate. It's going to be comfortable and everybody's going to be safe.
Perfect. Perfect. I mentioned in my preamble about avoiding the temptation to solve the immediate at the risk of detrimental to the long term. And Reclaim's a great example for this. So it's really hard to think about it right now because you're trying to help a customer right now. But that 410A you might be tempted to use to top off a 454 system is 410A, you're never going to get back out of it. And it won't be that long where the supplies and availability of 410A have tightened up enough that you're going to wish you had it at some point in time. So there's a commercial interest in not mixing this, making sure that you have access to good reusable 410A down the road when you need it, right?
Absolutely. And that's can't predict, the future on that, but you can see that the how much it costs and the availability of refrigerants, it's
Yeah. And
going to get more and more. Yeah.
we're feeling the pressure in some states too to also try to mandate the use of reclaimed refrigerant even for the A2Ls in some applications. Now, we're not all the way there yet, but I think we should be thinking about it. It could come on the horizon. So again, by mixing that, you're also devaluing even the 454B, which you might need in the near future here too. So,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely. And with the 410A, when you're, just to hit that point again, the performance is there. You're taking a guess that it's going to work at all, putting the 410A. And if that system comes charged with 6 pounds, 8 pounds, 12 pounds, if you have to, remove it all, pay to get it incinerated, and then use your valuable 454B just to get that system up and running, again, you'd be far ahead just looking at some of these other best practices or waiting for the 454B.
Right, great point. Listen, I'll put you on the spot a little bit with the question here about the cylinders. We have been asked a little bit about, okay, maybe I can't get all the 20 pounders that I really want, but I can get a larger one. Are there best practices or risk factors if I'm going to try to transfer, say, 454B from cylinder to cylinder? I'm catching you a little bit out of the wing on this one, so feel free to defer if you don't have a ready-made answer.
Yeah, I think I might have to defer on this one because I do not think, yeah, I guess I don't know what can legally be done with that. I don't know if you can put that transfer that into a cylinder. I don't believe that you can. But again, I'm going to defer on that one. I think that there's some experts out there that would have to answer that one
Well,
for me.
I maybe I should have framed it even more so. Like legality, yeah, if you're transferring ownership, then that becomes a little bit different, or you're reselling. Then there's a legality issue. But even just the technical part of it, I mean, 434 is a blend, right? Like, and I might, I'm curious or concerned that if you just tried to simply take a big cylinder and fill smaller ones with it, how do you? There's got to be some best practice, I would think, technically, to make sure that you're maintaining that blend in that cylinder transfer too, correct?
Sure. Yeah. With any blend like that, you are going to have to transfer by liquid in order to ensure that the blend is consistent with what it was designed as. So,
Yeah, I
mhm.
mean, listen, I just hit that one because listen, I love the creativity and resourcefulness that we're hearing about in the field, trying to find a way to do things the right way. But again, this is a bit of a new world. These are new substances, new
Mhm.
applications, and everything. And I mean, we know that they have very specific requirements for how the cylinders are even transported, let alone transferring the refrigerant. So I guess the bottom line is make sure you really know what you're doing if you're going to try to do it, and make sure you've gotten some sign off from somebody in the know from the chemical side of it, right? Like, will it even
Mhm.
physically work if I want to, do these type of transfers? So,
Mhm.
well, let's look forward a little bit, Mike, and let's just think a bit now about some action items, right? Taking all of this around here, like, technically speaking, and what action items would you give to the audience out there, distributor, contractor alike, to help us get through this situation and frankly save face for the industry or avoid a black eye for the industry if we happen to be caught doing the wrong thing too many times.
Mhm. Yeah, it's just shore up your best installation practices and use this opportunity to become better. And make sure that you're reporting and commissioning and following the manufacturers and the laws, right? The safety side of it as well. And um, drawing a blank on my next thought. It was a good one too. It was really good.
No doubt.
Um,
Well, here, I'll save you some time. I'm going to drone for just a quick second while you think that up and everything. But um, about the training, the guys like Mike out there, all you distributors who do a lot of training, my first point is make sure you have a degree of verification in the training you do. I know it's hard to do it that way. The webinars, classroom can be great, but is it just kind of going in one ear out the other, or are your students really absorbing the information? Can they prove that they know it? Like, find some way that has that. I will tell you, we're very proud of the fact that Nate certified a bunch of HARDI's A2L transition courses. They all have testing components. You have to complete some knowledge verification before you can move on to the next section. So whether it's ours or your own or whatever you do, find some way to get some knowledge verification. And frankly, I think the students will take some pride in it too, right? They'll come out knowing that they know what's going on with all of that. Did you happen to come back with your thought? Did your light bulb?
no, it's gone. It's
It's
gone. It,
gone.
it
It's
probably
gone.
wasn't very good.
So a few other just kind of broader management recommendations around all this. There really should not be a massive servicing demand for the 454B systems in particular. There's been more installed than we expected, but it's still not like they should be going through a bunch of service and maintenance already. So you really do want to tie your refrigerant, your 454B refrigerant purchases to your new system installations. That's the priority. That's the need here. So stocking a ton of service trucks that aren't doing really hardly any installations with 454B is probably not a winning financial model for your contracting business right now. Mike, comments on that?
Yeah, you definitely, again, back to that line set and the charging, you know how much that you're going to need. If you follow these best practices on the installation, pressure testing, evacuation, make sure it's leak free and tight. It is just going to be that refrigerant's going to be needed for the installation for that additional charge,
Mhm.
and you can predict that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I've had some really great creative conversations with contractors, distributors, OEMs, you name it out there. Really good creative ways. You're really in a bunch in a pinch. You're trying to service a customer, but you just don't have everything you need to do that right A2L installation. Um, we've seen some creativity around financing or maintenance agreement programs to at least get them through with their existing system as much as you can. You roll in that service, that repair work into the broader financing of the full system installation that you can then plan and do at their convenience and when you have everything you need to do it right with the right amount of time. Mike, is that are there is that a good way to go? Is that something that could help us maybe get through this a little bit better?
Yeah, I love that idea. I love the idea of servicing, keeping it essentially limping along a little bit. Sometimes you may have to get creative that way, but keep those systems going. And then just, this date in the future when it becomes available, then, the customer is going to appreciate that too, that, you're being upfront and honest and explaining everything with them. It's going to be a win for you, I think.
Yeah, and are talking with our financing partners, they'll say like that, that they can work with you. They can make sure that you've got a program that'll do that, so you aren't going to lose that later sale
Hmm.
because it's all tied together, right? So that's always been the concern in the past. If I do this fix, how am I guaranteed to get the replacement, right?
Yeah.
So there are ways I think to get around that. I think also you talked about pre-charge, you talked about line set charge. I think this documentation is a really big deal, right? So the manufacturers are doing everything they can to try to help in this whole situation, which also includes adjusting maybe even to some degree their pre-charge amounts. So I think it makes a lot of sense that before you take on any equipment or any system, you already know by documentation exactly to what it's been pre-charged to and exactly what the specifications are for the charge for additional feet of line set, correct? Like that should not be a super heavy lift, right? For a contractor to take to a job.
No, absolutely not. That's where, that a little bit of work ahead of time, understanding what your line set length is, rather than just leaving it up to the installation crew to top it off based off of subcooling. You're going to get the majority of the time, the vast majority of the time, you're going to get that spot on. So you will be able to predict how much you're going to need for X amount of jobs.
Excellent. Terrific. So let's see. To the crew, do we have some other questions? Let's see. We got another one here. Uh, okay. So, very relevant question. When is the last 410A system install date? Is this being delayed? The easy answer, you can take either one you want, Mike.
I'm not sure. I mean, last I heard, it's still at the end of the year.
It
So
is still
I
at the end
have
of the
not
year.
heard that's getting delayed. So I'm
Yep.
I'm not going to plan for anything getting delayed.
Yep.
I think that everybody's just, well, December 31st. That
Yes.
is it.
That is it. That is it. And that's what you should be planning on. Is it being delayed? I do not anticipate it to be delayed. And if it were to be delayed, I do not want this to get into a policy discussion at all. If it were, it would be another like 11th hour kind of delay. So that's not something you can plan your business on. It's not something you can plan your inventory and your purchases on. So don't try to, right? Assume this is the end and this is it. And by the way, the allotment of 410A as an actual gas refrigerant is not going up anytime soon either. So it's just
Hmm.
not a long-term viable solution to just continue kick the can down the road, right? So
Hmm.
is it by policy impossible for the installation ban date to change or to be altered? No. Would you know anytime soon or even relatively before January 1st of 2026? Probably not anyway. So should it impact your behavior right now? No. You should be planning to go full speed ahead with the transition.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Um, Let's see. So we got a question here about how we are trying to help with access to 454B, in particular with the contractors. So few things here. So I'm very pleased to report that a lot of our conversations with the OEMs have been very productive. They're getting creative about ways that they can help because interestingly enough, so for example, the availability of refrigerant to build new equipment is not a problem. It really is the supply chain around those service cylinders essentially. But it's not even just the cylinders. It's the process by which gas actually gets into the cylinders and then out to the market. So the manufacturers, the OEMs, some of them are looking really hard about how they can help with any of the excess bulk that they have, getting that out there to the market. And so we're working as closely as we can with them. Any help that they can get, connecting them again with others in the supply chain who are approved down packers of the refrigerant. Same thing goes with the producers. A lot of time spent with the producers who are doing everything they can as well to try to increase their capacity. Now, again, just remember, this is not just like making more 410A. It's a completely different supply chain, even for the producers and the packaging of an A2L versus an A1. So it's not just that the existing infrastructure could be flipped overnight to do all this A2L packaging. It just doesn't work that way. And when the demand ended up going so much faster than everyone thought, it just exceeded the capacity. So the producers are working hard to find additional partners that they can work on for this capacity, but it can't just be anybody. It just can't be anybody who dealt with refrigerant 5 years ago who wants to get back into it. They have to be approved, certified, and rated for being able to handle and manage the A2L refrigerants. So capacity is being added, but it's just, you got to be patient with this one. It's not something that they can just flip a light switch and it's all ready to go tomorrow. All right, Mike, I tell you what, I've learned a lot. Thank you. Our questions have kind of slowed down here. Thank you to everyone on the call, on our live stream and everything like that. Thank you so much to our partners at NATE, the North American Technician Excellence. That's why we called them in for this thing, because this is about doing it right and being rewarded for it. So document, toot your own horns out there doing it right, and win that trust with the customers and win in the market overall. Distributors, again, promote the right things, sift through the noise. There's a lot of stuff out there, chatter, misinformation about what's going on here. Rely on sources like us and Nates of the world and others for that single source of truth. Pass that down. Over communicate to your customers. There's no downside to it right now on this, so they understand what's going on here. And then the final thing I'll say is everything points to this being short term. This is something that's going to be a pain in the rear through a lot of the summer, but then we should get past this. And if we clean up the rest of our houses in terms of refrigerant management, our forecasting, our communications in the channel, we should be able to eliminate or avoid future disruptions going forward and proceed on to this path. So let's focus on the things we can control. That's the number one message. Focus on things we control. Mike, you are a wealth of knowledge. Thank you for helping the community out here, and all the members out there. Please keep the feedback coming to HARDI so we know where to keep asking, pushing, and doing what we can to help you guys. Mike, closing comment?
I appreciate the platform and letting me talk here today. And yeah, it's a hot topic right now, and hopefully I was able to add some insight.
Terrific. Excellent. Thank you, everyone. The recording will be available as soon as possible, and you're welcome to share this out as far and wide as you like. Thank you.